Afraid to scale your business because you worry you won't have time for a life? Meet Jazze. She runs a 7-figure online business and recently voice messaged me from a cafe at the beach where she was raving over the latest fiction book she had just finished. This, by the way, was on Wednesday. To which I asked her, Jazze, how often exactly are you working? The answer was just a couple days a week. She designed her business intentionally to be able to be spacious for her life. And this interview is packed with so many practical and some woo tips to help you do the same. Jazze, the other day you sent me a voice message. It was like a Thursday or Wednesday or something, and you were casually just mentioning that you were like at a cafe down by the beach reading a fiction book. And I know from our chats that you only work a few days a week and run a multi-6-figure business. So let's start with that. Let's start with, can you please describe your work week and your workload? And then let's talk about how exactly you've achieved that.
Love this. Side note, I am so obsessed with fantasy fiction. So if you're not into it, you need to get into it. I don't know if you've read Fourth Wing, but it's amazing. So get into it. It's amazing.
I'll write it down.
Yes, we'll have so many chats about this, I'm sure. But I love this question. So I work usually 3 days a week, but then kind of have overflow on the other days. So I basically not squish, but I do most things on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because in my first few years of business, in our third year of business, that was our first 7-figure year. And then I was completely burnt out. I was overworking, just felt really unfulfilled, just wasn't enjoying the way that I was doing things. So from then on, I tried to fix it, tried to, do different ways, test different ways of doing things, And so I started by spreading out my work week. So I would have a few hours each day, Monday to Friday. And one of the things that I started to learn through that process is that I wasn't really giving my nervous system a chance to actually stop and decompress. So what I started to do instead, and also I'm really into human design and astrology. And from a human design perspective, I am a sacral manifesting generator. And so my strategy in life is to basically respond to the things that are going on around me, have the response, and then move forward. But in order to really attune to my body, and human design is literally just about coming back into your body and listening to the cues of that. For me to actually listen to my response, I need to be rested. I need to be regulated and not in a hyper state of dysregulation and kind of that frantic energy, because everything feels like a yes then, right? And that's what I didn't want to happen. So what I decided to do is test having my work week as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and just having more full days, so that if I wanted to rest from literally sometimes even a Thursday through to Monday, I could. And that meant that our weekends were completely free, and my nervous system and my sacral had a complete chance to disconnect. And that has been, that's changed my whole life and business. And I've done that for probably close to 3 years now. And it's cool because it also means that if I do have a busier week, or if I've had an idea and I'm creating something, I can do that on the Friday, or I can do that even on a weekend sometimes. So I'm just getting really excited about things because I've had the rest, I've had that consistent rest. And the other thing that I do that I really, really love is 1 week per month is closed to calls. And people can't book any calls with me. And I'm still doing stuff, I'm still working, but not having to space hold, because obviously the work that I do in, with my work and in coaching is space holding. And I do mainly, high ticket work. So I'm in masterminds and holding that space. And I think having that real break in that week every month and not having my calendar open to calls just really gives my nervous system a chance to just decompress and reset, ready to go again.
I love that. I also love that because you do some high-level coaching and masterminds, and so people think that if you have these really high-touch programs that you have to just constantly be on calls and stuff. So that's really impressive that you manage that. So
I also have co-coaches too. I made a very intentional decision to grow my business with support and to have co-coaches in this space, and I've just prioritized doing that in the most profitable way for me and my business, but so that my business was never completely reliant on me as part of the delivery. And so that has been the case. Like I've worked with our co-coach over 4 years now, and I've been in business for 7. So I did it like quite early on in my business, and it's probably one of the best decisions that I made, because obviously with the human design and astrology knowledge as well, I've hired our co-coaches based on that too. So everyone offers a really different perspective. Everyone has a completely different skill set and gifts, and it's just like an amazing community, and it feels really nice. And I think it really helps me to actually step back and rest, because I know that everyone's being held, like even when I'm not there.
You told me my human design, and so I appreciate that. But anyways, can you go through like the major sort of like human design types, and then how those people should be thinking about their work if they really want to like work in a way that fits with their human design?
Totally. So I think one of the best things to do, so firstly, in terms of like, you can just Google what's my human design, and there'll be so many different websites that come up. The main one that I sort of use is my body graph, because you can save multiple charts and it gives you tons of different information. But if you Google it, you'll be able to find lots of information there. So that's the first step. And so basically there are a number of different energy types or aura types, depends on, you know, who's talking about human design and how they phrase it. But there is manifesting generator, manifestor, projector, and reflector. And I think one of the really great ways to just start playing around with it a little bit is to figure out, and all of the websites tell you this, is to have a look at what the signature is for that design type. It's basically what is your type's measure of success. So for example, I think from memory you were a manifesting generator, which is the same as me. Yeah. Not surprised at all. I think a lot of entrepreneurs would be MGs. And so our measure of success and our signature is satisfaction. The key is to think about what satisfaction means to you, not the societal construct of satisfaction, which is, oh, I've done a hard day's work, you know, I deserve to sit on the couch with a wine or binge Netflix or whatever it is. I mean, we love to do those things, but satisfaction from your perspective, you know, for me, satisfaction is working on things that I love, that I feel really lit up by. And satisfaction is prioritizing my well-being. Like if I've worked on things that I love that day and I am doing something for me, I feel immensely satisfied. So right now in this season of life, one of the things that I'm loving doing is working and then heading to the pool to swim some laps. That's satisfaction to me. And everyone's version of that is going to be different. And then another design type, I work with a lot of projectors. Their measure of success and their signature is success and recognition. And so when I am coaching a client who is a projector, one of the things that I'm always guiding them back to is what like way of working, what offer, what content, whatever it is that we're speaking about makes you feel the most sane and the most recognized and the most successful. And again, encouraging them to think about what's your version of success? What's your version of recognition? Because every projector is going to be really different. And for most projectors, it is, I want to have the most amount of impact and guide with the least amount of effort. Right? Projectors really need a lot of spaciousness in their life and business. And so just understanding what that is, for manifestors, it's peace. You know, so what is peace to you if you're a manifestor? You know, what does peace mean? You know, like society tells you that peace is a certain thing, but what does that mean to you? And how can you access that and build that into your schedule? I always say this to clients, that space doesn't just happen because you hit multiple 6 figures or 7 figures in your business. Like it's not just this thing that you get to like, oh, cool, I've like got to this level. So my reward is like, yeah, it's like, yay, now I get space. Like you have to actually build it into your schedule. And so I build in the space, but I also build in that satisfaction time. It's like, you know, and I'm always thinking about that whenever a podcast pitch comes across my desk, or like you reaching out and saying like, are you open to doing this? Like, do I feel satisfied by that? Does that feel like an exciting opportunity? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's do it. But that's always my North Star. And I think that really has a lot of ROI in business too, right? Because if you're making intentional, aligned decisions, they're probably going to have a pretty good ROI.
I hear you. Okay, let's talk about that. So people will often think about like, oh, I need to do better time management. I need like a productivity hack or whatever in order to get me to this magical place. But I've noticed, I think you've noticed, yeah, it's being about very conscious about the decisions that you're making in the business and designing the business and making very different choices from a lot of other business owners. So there was a lot of conscious choices that went into you having this like work-life balance that you have and everything. And a lot of people who have our sizes of businesses don't have that. So are you just amazing at productivity hacks, or are you making different choices which are leading to this level of freedom, and what are those choices?
So I think, again, that kind of comes back to that like uniqueness, like conversation too, that like I think one person's time management hack is probably not going to be the time management hack for you. Like I remember like one of the first things that I tried to do in my business and failed miserably was like time blocking. You know, and being like, okay, well, for these 2 hours, I am working on content. And as I was saying before, as a sacral, like we respond to things external to us. So we don't just sit there, we can't sit down and then just like try and come up with all this stuff in our mind. That's not how we're designed to work. And so time blocking and that kind of thing worked, like it just failed miserably for me. And I am also someone who will sometimes work on things that are actually due at a later date. And my team's like, oh my God, Jazz, just work on the thing that's like next due. But if I've had a response on that thing, I let myself follow that because I know I'll get it done in like a quarter of the time. And then I work on the thing that I'm, you know, that's next, you know, priority of importance. So for me, it's been about like really understanding how does my energy work. And for me, human design and astrology was a really good starting place for that, because it's rather than sort of, again, sitting there and being like, how do I like to move through the world? And like, how does my energy work? Like that's such a like open-ended question. So I loved being able to like get a human design reading or like just explore a little bit about what my astrology was, because I feel like there was a lot of nuggets in there around what feels good. And I also think as well that we spoke before about doing, you know, I work in a high kind of like an intimate capacity with people. And when you look at my astrology, like my sun sign is in Cancer in the 7th house of intimate partnerships. I don't know any other way than working intimately with people. Like that feels really good to me. And I think I shared this with you when we launched an offer that was more self-paced, and I was like, oh, like this is so hard, like, you know, and a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, passive is the dream, like that's what I'm doing. And for me, it was a real edge for me in my business. And so I think, you know, coming back to like the intentional decisions that I make are, I'm doing it in a way that makes sense for me, even if that's not what everyone else is doing. And I think that just makes you more efficient. And it creates more momentum because you're working in a way that feels useful and aligned with your vision and your values. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've always reminded myself is like intention is choosing your vision over your circumstances. And for me, my vision was always creating a lot of space. I am a 12th house moon, and the 12th house, so your moon sign is all about like your emotional state and your emotional well-being and your moods, you know, like what is your default when you feel like things aren't going to plan? Like what do you need in order to feel, you know, really emotionally supported? And the 12th house is a very inward house. It's like secretive and it's like nobody talk to me kind of vibe. And so I've learned over time that, like, you know, I was speaking before about the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like I've learned over time that I have to have pretty much a full day each week where like nobody really talks to me.
It's funny because so when we were at a mastermind, we were both kind of describing how we work, and we both realized like, wow, we have these really sort of like lazy, efficient methods of like working, and actually both have very like freedom-filled businesses. But we do it in such different ways. Like when you say like, oh, to me, it's so important to work with people intimately and everything. I like just can't. Like people needing me is like, I don't know. It's just so difficult, and needing to having to show up for a call every week or something. It's like, I can't handle that. And so like having the self-paced programs, again, it just shows like whatever works for you basically. So like we both have the same outcome, but it's actually achieved in very different ways. And that's why I find so surprising about your work is that you can work with people so intimately, but still have so much freedom. Because when I think about like working intimately, like high level clients, whatever, I just think, oh my gosh, that's gotta be just so heavy.
Yes, totally. And I just pulled up your chart again for when we did it. And your sun is in Aquarius in the 5th house. And the 5th house is all about like pleasure and fun and romance and joy. And so obviously your version of that is that, right? Which is why you've like naturally gravitated towards that being your North Star and that being like the most important thing for you, because like your sun sign is your like essence. Like we say, like the sun is like the inside of your home. And for you, the inside of your home is like pleasure, joy, fun, like romance. And like, that's your version of that.
Yeah, which is funny because one of my core business values, I redid them actually. I had some values in my business because I felt like I should have them. And then this year I realized like what my actual values are, and I just narrowed it down to 3, and one of them is joy. And that's it.
Yeah, I love it. And you've got like your moon as well, which again is like your emotional like well-being, is in Libra, which like that's the symbol of Libra is the scales. So like that balance, right? And it's in the first house of self. So like that to me makes some, and you're also a Libra rising, makes so much sense to me. There's also a lot of Capricorn in your chart, and I know that you are very like planned and like strategic. So like your business is literally a reflection of your natal chart.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't understand literally any of what you just said, but like, I think it's true. Is my takeaway from this whole like human design is I've kind of learned these things myself just over time, just seeing what feels good and doesn't feel good. And I guess if you can just read your chart and it tells you that, then you can be like, oh yeah, okay, and just like learn that faster and easier. So I guess that's the purpose. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think it's just about like experimentation, you know, and just, this is interesting. Like I'm going to see, you know, I'm going to work with that this week and see how that goes, you know. And for me, it just felt good to have a plan. Like it felt good to like see something, you know, when you just like see something written down and you're like, okay, that it almost like reinforces what you were already thinking.
Yes.
I found it very impactful for me.
Yes, no, that totally makes sense. Okay. Coming back to, again, so let's talk about like specific business decisions that you've made that again allow for this level of freedom. Because a lot of people think, oh, if I run a multi-6-figure or $1 million business, like I can't work only 3 days a week or whatever. Like I think that's like a limiting belief that people have. Can you talk about what are choices that other people have made in business? You see other business owners doing this thing and you're like, I would not do that, or that doesn't work for me, or I'm going to build my business but not doing this thing. What are the choices that you've made that created the business in the current form that it is?
Oh, I love this question. So speaking about well, it's not even self-paced. It's my version of self-paced. The offer that we recently sold, it's called Constantly Converting. And the whole idea behind this program is to teach people how to create and refine the offer, messaging, and sales strategies to help them convert consistently. And that to me, like, understanding more about strategy and dedicating time to understanding strategy and infrastructure and foundations in my business was the most important correlator to having space in my business. Because, you know, for example, like if someone landed on my Instagram page, for example, we have highlights there that have, you know, like about me, my movement, work with me. That's like 3 slides. There's not, you know, when you go on someone's like Instagram, well, you're a non-Instagrammer, but like back when you were on Instagram and you go to someone's like a highlight and there'd be like all the boxes at the top and you'd be like tapping along to get to like something that was relevant. I see that all the time. And I'm like, you have such a short period of time to show someone why they should stay. Like in our recent launch, we looked at our Google Analytics statistics, and one of the things that blew my mind is the average time on any of the pages is 56 seconds. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, that is wild. And so it really like reiterated to me, like I gave myself a bit of a like pat on the back, because I really do pay attention to making sure the messaging is really compelling, but that messaging is congruent across platforms and repeated. Like you want your brand to feel familiar and trustworthy, and repetition is a way for you to do that. And so one of the biggest business decisions that we have made is to be good at that. You know, like we have a recurring task every month where we audit our highlights and our nurture sequence and any call to actions in posts, like especially the more recent ones, like are they updated to something that's relevant? Because you can spend all this time like showing up on Instagram stories or sending out emails or doing all of those things, but if your business is reliant on you doing that in order to convert, that's a problem. You know, like it needs to do some of the work for you when you are not there. And that to me, I think is probably the most important decision that I've made to be able to free up that space. Because I think for a lot of people, they're not in a position to have the space, not because there's not the opportunity to decide that in their calendar, it's because their business doesn't have the infrastructure to actually convert while they're not there.
It's funny because everything you say is like web design best practices. Like just like put onto Instagram basically. It's like, figure out what you want people to do. Like they are going to take one action and you have a very short period of time to get them to do that thing. So like be strategic in what don't put everything out there because it's actually counterproductive. So yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Love that. Okay. So yeah, when you talk about, so you do your strategy differently. So for a second there, I was thinking, is it like sales strategy or program design strategy, but it's like the strategy of getting people from wherever they're finding you, the marketing strategy, into whatever is right for them is what you're talking about there.
Yeah,
I think
that's one. Yeah, for sure. I think that's one piece, but also, you know, I think for us that really stems from like even right at the beginning of creating the offer. You know, one of the things that we have a really kind of like lengthy and robust offer creation. We call it the sold out offers process. I remember you saying to me, you're like, I love all the names that you have of things. Our sold out offers process. And, you know, that's like an interactive like Google sheet that's got like all of these different like elements that we want people to reflect on and think about, because I think that's another reason why people don't convert is like they've created an offer that's like the same as what everyone else has put out, you know, and it's like your uniqueness and your, you know, ability to like differentiate yourself in the marketplace is just as important as you getting the message out there, you know? So for us, it really starts like that sort of depth starts really early on in the process, because no like amount of like fancy branding or messaging is ever going to fix an offer that's like not very compelling in the first place.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of effort into that. And like, we also get a lot of resistance from clients, like new clients that come into our space are like, oh, I don't want another process. And I'm like, trust me, this will be different to everything you've ever done. You know, but there is this like, give me the secret, like give me the pathway, give me the secret. And it's like, it doesn't, if you want a multiple 6-figure and 7-figure business, that's not going to help you. Like that might get you to 6 figures of just like, oh, just take that thing and you know, do the same thing. But like at some point you have to start to use your discernment around you have to start to understand and deepen your own resonance with like your gifts and your uniqueness so that your audience can be in resonance with that too.
I think this is what I see all the time is when people start in business, they're very much so, they just look to whoever's like, I don't know, the popular one in the field and they just copy that. And that's just because they just don't know how to be unique or themselves and they don't understand that yet. And yeah, and the longer you're in business, the more your business becomes you and the stronger that actually becomes, which is amazing.
Totally. And I think there's still a time and a place for testing other people's strategies, you know, like how do we learn, you know, like that's a really important part of learning. But like you said, I think there's a point where that can't be the strategy anymore.
Yeah, exactly. If you really want to take it far, then trying to sell the same thing that someone else is selling is not going to fly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so time management is something that my audience feels like they are not fabulous at, which leads them to working all of the time. So do you think you're fabulous at time management, which allows for this, or is it something else that you think is key to, again, not having a business that runs your life and working constantly?
So I think for me, the thing that I'm good at is being intentional. Like everything I do in my business is for a purpose. And I mean, like when we were in Europe together, I got this like tattooed on my arm. I got intention tattooed on there because it is a core value of mine that, you know, and this is like my personal life too, you know, like all I have to do is go to Friday pickup and have a conversation with like some of the mums at school that are like, what are you getting up to this weekend, Jazz? And I'm like, oh, nothing, just regulating my nervous system. And they're like, what do you mean? Like half your luck, you know, like there's all these comments around like, I wish I could do that. And I'm like, but you can. This task is being done for a purpose. It's not like anytime I catch myself in I should or like I have to, like that's my like, okay, I've got to come back into choice, because I feel like when we are in the energy of choice and I am choosing to do this thing, we are naturally going to be more intentional, and probably more profitable too, because when I'm making a choice about something, like say I'm choosing to implement, I don't know, a funnel in my business, I'm probably going to look at the data. Like I'm probably going to be tracking that. I'm probably going to be like looking at that and like looking at ways that we can tweak it. Whereas if I'm in the energy of, oh, I have to implement this funnel, I'm probably not going to look at any data. I'm not going to have my finger on the pulse. So it's probably not going to be very high converting and very profitable. So I think it's not so much time management. It's more like I just don't do the things that I feel are like just don't matter.
Literally. Okay. So I speak about the same thing. So you use the word intention and I use the word decision making, but it's the exact same thing. It's like you're being like, I'm intentional about what I'm doing. And I'm like, I'm making decisions in a way which ensures that I'm not spending time on things that don't get me anywhere. Because like, if you, I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you do anything and then you realize later, oh, that wasn't worth it. Like the amount of time which you spent on that is unbelievable. And if you could have just made a better decision to start with of like, oh no, actually running this thing isn't a good idea because of X or something, then like it's not even about like time management. It's just about that you literally eliminate an entire project that could take you 3 to 4 months in your business. It's like, that is insane how much more productive you can be when you're like just being intentional or making good decisions about what projects you're implementing, what you're doing. It's just like night and day. You don't even need to be efficient then in your work because you just like literally again cut out like 4 months of work that other people are doing. So
exactly. And one of the quotes that I really don't really align with personally is like, a quick decision is a good decision. Like sometimes a quick decision isn't a good decision, because what the quick decision leads to is like doing things that don't matter and getting caught up in what everyone else is doing, you know? And like you said, that could take you 3 or 4 months. And it's not about perfection either. Like there's lots of things that I do that I'm like, oh, that was dumb, you know, or like that didn't work out. But like I'm still making an intentional choice to take action on that thing.
I agree. Okay, talk to me about regulating your nervous system. People say this a lot. What does that mean? What are you doing? If you had to explain it to the mom at the drop-off gates or pick-up gates, like what are you saying?
Yeah. I think it's like an understanding of like what your body's telling you, basically. Like having a somatic understanding of what things are for you and so for example, I understand what it feels like to be grounded. Like I can describe, so like beforehand when I was working with my coach on this, I've worked with her for like 3 years. She's like my energetic mentor. One of the things that was really funny when we first started working together is she would like ask me like, describe what it feels like to be grounded. And I'd be like, well, like, you know, there's not as much going on in my head. And like, I was just I was thinking it. I was thinking the feeling. Whereas now I know that I feel like grounded in my sit bones. And my shoulders are further back, you know, whereas like I know that when I'm stressed, like I know where it shows up somatically. And so I can then take a second to be like, oh, like I'm a little bit dysregulated right now. I'm in freeze mode, or I'm in, you know, fight or flight right now. And I need to take a second. And sometimes that's literally just like shaking like all the energy out for a moment and doing like, I just do simple like heart breathing throughout the day, which is like exhaling for longer than you're inhaling. So it might be like inhaling for 3, exhaling for 6, and slowly moving up to like 5 and 10 if you can do it. But I think for me, it's like just simply understanding what my body is doing basically and what it's telling me. I think it really connects back to that conversation we just had about intention, right? It's like at any given moment, like your body is giving you a message. And our ability to be able to listen to that means that we can then make an informed decision about what our body needs from a nourishment perspective. And I feel the same way about like strategies and time management, that like one person's like, oh my God, this is amazing, may not be the same for someone else. And I feel the same way about like diet and like nutrition and, you know, food. Like some people like, this is what you should be eating. And it's like, yeah, but like we are all entirely different humans. So eating the same thing makes no sense. You know, the same as like putting the same skincare on our face, you know, like we all have different compositions, like Ayurvedic, like principles, right? Like, so for me, it's like understanding what my cues are in my body and knowing what my pattern is and pattern of behavior is like, and like even just like, not even just in terms of the body, but like your behavior in like the way that you're like operating that day. So like, for example, if I'm stressed, my natural tendency is to like get really distracted. So like I'll be sitting there like typing and I'm like, oh, I just don't know what I'm doing. And it will take ages, or like I'll start one task and then go and do something different. And that's actually not a normal behavior for me. Like it is, I'm usually pretty like, I'm doing this task and I'm focused and that's what's happening. But the moment I start to get a bit distracted is like my cue that like my body doesn't feel okay right now. So it just needs a second, you know, and maybe I'll still go back to that task, or maybe I'll be like, does this need to happen right now? I kind of believe that nothing is an emergency in my business. So I just will be like, okay, I can deal with that tomorrow, or I can delegate that to someone else. So like for me, like regulation, we're not always going to be 100% regulated 100% of the time. It's never going to happen. But it's like an understanding every day that like at any one moment, your body's giving you a cue and it's your choice whether you are listening to that or ignoring it.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Okay. Has there ever been a time in your business where your work-life balance was absolutely shot and the thing was taking over your life? And like, how did you turn that around?
Absolutely. Like we grew really fast. So we had our first 7-figure year in year 3 of business. And so it was me and one other VA. So I was working a lot, but I think the thing, and this has kind of been the golden thread throughout our conversation, yes, it was overworking that caused that, but I also think that a big part of that was like trying to fit myself in a box and like trying to make time blocking and like this thing over here and like having a 3-month mastermind like everyone else was doing. Like that's what was causing the most disruption. I remember when I learned about being a manifesting generator and about satisfaction, and I was like, everything. No wonder my business has taken over my life, because I don't feel satisfied at all. Like I don't feel fulfilled or satiated by my work, because I've been operating based on like success, like how much money I'm making. And when I realized that that's actually not really what drives me, like it really isn't in terms of like my chart and of course we want to make money. Like we live in a 3D world and money is important to live as, you know, in this world. And also I feel satisfied when I'm working on things I enjoy. I don't feel satisfied because like someone paid me in full today. You know, like it's great, but it's like, it's not what drives me. And like starting to understand that more about myself was an opportunity for me to like really come back into, well, what parts of my business don't really feel satisfying? And is that something that actually has to happen? You know, like I was saying to you before, like working intimately feels really easy for me. You know, like people would look at my business model, people like you, and be like, oh my God, this is giving me anxiety, even just like hearing you talk about this, you know, but for me, it feels really great. But, you know, at the time, everything was short term. Everything was like maximum of 3 months. And I had a low ticket membership where obviously there was not much support from me because it was a low ticket offer. And I was like, when I learned about my astrology and human design and just like started to connect with like whether I feel lit up by this or not, I was like, this is my worst nightmare. Like this is just not something that feels nourishing for me at all. And I started to just clear the pathway and like refine my business model so that it made more sense for me. And naturally, like the work-life balance started to improve. It didn't improve right away, but again, that was like choosing my vision over my circumstances. Like I couldn't click my fingers and change it right away. I had a 7-figure business with like contracts to fulfill and tax to pay. So I needed to keep moving forward, but every day I just got a little bit more intentional and a little bit more intentional. And every time I had a decision to make, I would just take a minute to be like, what feels most satisfying for me to do?
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I honestly find that for anyone who's considering quitting social media, not being on it is the best thing for not shutting yourself and not seeing what other people are doing. Like I am not paying attention to what is happening, like what other people are doing. Like you, before we started recording, you mentioned like, oh yeah, if you notice this person, like this mastermind business friend of ours is doing this. And like, I haven't seen that. Like I like literally don't know what is happening. And I am very happy that way. And I do find that it like reduces that comparison, or I should run a 3-month program, or everyone's doing this, or this is what's on trend right now. Like I am not following those things. And I feel like therefore I have a very sort of like steady path, if that makes sense, because I'm not, again, like trying to keep up with whatever the latest like SLO hack, I don't know, like marketing trend or program trend design or whatever. And so it's really peaceful, and that's really nice.
Yeah, I've contemplated this, like, sorry, when you first told me that, and I was like, oh, goals. I was like, that's amazing. And I really sat with, how would my business go? Like if I wasn't on socials, you know, and I really started thinking about that, you know, as we've mentioned already in this episode, in this conversation, I am really focused on our foundations and making sure that like we're never reliant on any one thing. I'm not there yet, but it's something that I'm definitely sitting with, and it's definitely something that my relationship with social media has improved so much, especially with these strategies, right? Because I'm like, well, I can take a break. You know, I don't need to be on socials. And for me, I like kind of and for those of you that are on Instagram, like this may be helpful for you, but one of the things that I say to myself is, you know, I'll show up if I get time today and I feel inspired to do so. But if I feel like I have to, that's a problem with my strategy. And that's a problem with like my business infrastructure. So I've really sort of had that relationship this year, and that's been really good.
Yeah. And I feel like for anyone who's watching this and they're like, well, every day I have to go on Instagram, I feel like it's a have to and not a I'm coming from this place of joy and I want to do it, is like not the right marketing strategy for you then. Yeah. And that's when you know, if it's every day I don't want to do this, then there's like, you got to find another option. And that's what I would also say is like when I talk to people about not being on social at all and they're like, oh, that sounds amazing, but I could never. And it's like, you do need another marketing strategy. Like, let's not get it twisted here. Like you do need a marketing strategy for your business. And so it's key that you have something else. I know you have a podcast. So it's about, you definitely need something else. You can't just, unfortunately, not market a business. But it's just one of many options, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And we're, you know, a big fan of like, you don't need to be on all the platforms. You just need to be on, like, you know, again, making an intentional decision about what makes the most sense for your brand.
Exactly. Totally. Okay, cool. Last thing. If I'm starting a business right now, what are some practical tips that you could give me to ensure that I create that lifestyle supporting business and not the one which takes over my life? If you had to sort of like sum it up into a few tips.
Get really clear on your gifts, like your uniqueness, like reflect on what you did as a child. Like when there was no bills to pay and there was no like just no stress in the world. Like what were the things that you really excelled at school? You know, were you the one that was like connecting, you know, people, you know, were you the one that was like hovering amongst all the different groups? Like you're really good in that sort of capacity. Maybe you love being in groups. Maybe you know, had like one really close best friend and you really love to work one-on-one and you really love to be intimate with people. Maybe you were the one that was like always drawing and always painting. Like maybe you're really creative, but that hasn't had an opportunity to shine like in your life so far. Like I think just like starting from that place, because I think one of the biggest things that I think leads to burnout, leads to like not being efficient, leads to, you know, a really poor work-life balance, is like not getting clear on that and looking outside of ourselves to create the business. And I think that's important, right? We want to learn from other people because there's people who have gone before us that have a lot of value to give. And we also need to be able to use our discernment around how does this strategy apply to me and my gifts and my uniqueness and my business strategy? Like, what can I take from this and what can I leave behind? And I think that's something that I really, you know, while I wouldn't change my journey because, you know, I think that taught me a lot. And it's part of the reason why, you know, our movement, like yours, lazy efficiency, which I love. And like for us, we talk a lot about richness without sacrifice, you know, and I think for a lot of people, the reason why that doesn't exist is because they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, which is just never going to happen. So that's my advice of like, learn from people, you know, because I think that's really important, especially when you're just starting out, but also like, come back to, you know, maybe you print it out or you write it on your fridge or something that's like, these are my gifts and this is what matters to me. And I'm always going to run everything I do through this filter.
I think that needs to be an opt-in gift of like the journal prompts to ask yourself, or like the questions to ask yourself to figure that out. Because as you were saying, like think about what you did in high school and think about what you did when you were younger and everything. And I was like, could I figure that out like from that information? And yeah, I feel like I need a good like 10 to 20 questions to really like help me dive into nailing that. So if you ever create that, that'd be great.
Well, and there's like, we have a PDF that's like find your genius zone as well. It's like similar, you know, like
perfect.
Jay Hendricks' work, like The Big Leap, and he's got a book called The Genius Zone, and he's got like a number of really cool questions. We've got a few of them in that PDF as well. Like, yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah.
We'll link that. We will link that because that's, I think, exactly what people need at the end of this. If they're like, okay, I want that, how do I do that? Is starting to dive into those questions to figure out how, because I mean, you can either do it one way, you do it with those questions faster, or you can do it the way we've done it, which I guess is like take a 7 to 8 years to build a business and figure it out over time. But I'd be like, I can't handle this. I need a different way.
Yeah. Human design and astrology one too that's just got 5 like placements in there, like 5 elements. I think there's 3 astrology ones and 2 human design ones as well. So for anyone that is watching that is a little bit into that kind of thing, we've got that too. So then that's a free download as well.
Okay, amazing. We'll link both those. Thank you so much, Jazz. This was
You're
wonderful.
welcome. Love being here.
If you're at the multi-6 figures level or 7 figures and you're feeling the lazy efficiency vibes and you want more intimate support in your business that covers both the energetic side of business and the strategy portion, then do know that Jazz supports a select few clients in her high-level mastermind. I will link it below where you can find more details. And if you want some practical tips on organizing yourself and your work for more batching and efficiency, so you can also cut down on the number of days a week that you work, then check out this video next where I will tour you through my project management system, Asana, which is without a doubt my #1 productivity hack.